So friends, let's complete this topic. Whatever we have seen till now, let's solve one or two MCQs and see how far we have got the subject. Diagnostic serum markers in Down syndrome are all except free histriol, AFP, HCG and progesterone. So any guesses? Very obviously the answer is progesterone, because free histriol, AFP and HCG are the markers for chromosomal abnormalities and progesterone is not at all a marker. Methods of confirmation that whether that particular baby is having chromosomal abnormality or not. Now suppose I am the patient and you want to see my chromosomes. What you need to do, you have to take my blood and send to the lab. But if when the fetus is small in early second trimester, we cannot do that. Fetal blood sampling can be done around 20-22 weeks, and experts can do it maybe as early as 18 but not before that, because fetus is tiny, the blood vessels are tiny, so we cannot really take blood sample from that. So what do you do then for having fetal karyotype? Either we can go for chorionic villus sampling, that means from the placenta we take chorionic villi and send it for culture, or after 15 completed weeks we can go and put a needle inside the uterine cavity and take almost 15 to 20 cc of amniotic fluid and send it to the genetic lab, and the fibroblast will be cultured and the report would be given. Chordocentesis is the procedure where fetal blood is taken, but as I told you, that is 18 weeks onwards. Sonography, which tells us about the structural defects. Anomaly scan, which is done around 18 to 20 weeks, rules out most of the structural defects. For cardiac defects, 20 weeks onwards, around 22 to 24 weeks, the scan is done to rule out cardiac defects. So let's see now how these procedures are done and how they are helpful. Again, there are many MCQs on the procedures, their side effects, what tissue is to be sent. So please pay attention. Chorionic villus sampling is the earliest confirmatory test which can be done in first trimester. It is done around 11 to 13 weeks or 10 to 12 weeks transcervically and transabdominally around 10 weeks. Trophoblast cells are obtained. It is always better to do the test after 11 completed weeks, because limb abnormalities are seen if the test is done earlier, 9 to 10 weeks and earlier than that. So 11 weeks onwards the test it becomes safe. Direct preparation and culture takes 10 to 14 days of the fibroblast. Fetal loss rate is very important, because when you are talking about this test and taking consent from the patient, you have to explain it to the patient that this procedure is invasive and it has failure rate of almost 0.9%. That means 1%. If a person does 100, 1 is likely to get aborted. Accuracy, it's very accurate. And first trimester. So the biggest advantage of chorionic villus sampling is that the test is done in first trimester. If the test comes positive, means if the fetus has chromosomal abnormality, we can give option of termination, and for termination the methods used are first trimester methods. So we kind of save the patient from all the psychological trauma as well as physical trauma. Later we diagnose the chromosomal abnormality, then the methods are applied of second trimester, which you know that they are little lengthy method. First trimester termination is much easier, and once she comes to know that whatever baby is growing in her womb is chromosomally abnormal, the psychological trauma doesn't allow the patient to continue the pregnancy for longer time. She wants to get that pregnancy terminated as early as possible. So CVS gives us that freedom or that advantage, that early diagnosis, less psychological trauma, and early method of termination can be used. Amniocentesis is to be done from 14 to 6, but always better after 15 completed weeks. Fetal fibroblast and even the fluid can be sent for biochemical analysis. In CVS also, that sample can be used for single gene disorders in anemias or thalassemia to find out as early as possible. The culture of fibroblast, which are obtained on amniocentesis, it takes 3 weeks almost. Fetal loss rate is much lesser, almost half in comparison with chorionic villus sampling. It is around 0.5%. Accuracy, it's highly accurate, and it is termination is second trimester, so it becomes risky over here. That you have to do the test, then get the report in 3 weeks. So the patient is under tension that whether the report will arrive before 20 weeks of the boundary of Indian medical law for termination of pregnancy, and that's why the situation is little tricky, and second trimester methods are to be used for termination, which are less convenient than the first trimester methods. Chordocentesis can be done from 18 weeks onwards. Fetal white blood cells are obtained. The report is much earlier, within 48 hours. But the fetal loss rate here is very high, almost around 2%. So it's double of chorionic villus sampling, but it's very accurate. We take blood from umbilical vein. There are places where either in the liver where the vein bifurcates, or from the free loop of the cord, the sample can be taken. It depends on the person who is performing it and the specialization of that particular person. MCQ: hazards of chorionic villus biopsy are limb abnormalities, spina bifida, Down syndrome, and abortion. Now tell me, what would be the answer? Down syndrome cannot be, because it's a chromosomal abnormality. By doing CVS, we cannot have Down syndrome created. Spina bifida, no doubt. It's a congenital anomaly. Because of CVS, it will not be there. So what is left is limb abnormality and abortion. Which one to select? Now, limb abnormalities are found when the CVS is done before 9 completed weeks. But on an average, we don't do CVS at that time. As I told you, it is done 11 completed weeks, 11 to 13 weeks onwards. So then the hazard should be the complication which we have spoken about, that is abortions, which is the common complication, and the rate of abortion in CVS is around 1%, 0.9 to 1%. So the answer of this MCQ is abortions. Now coming to ultrasound, it is a non-invasive tool, very safe. Transabdominal as well as transvaginal scan can be done in early pregnancy to identify fetal structural abnormalities. Now let's see how ultrasound helps us. In first trimester, it gives us information about the sac. Around 5 weeks the sac is seen. Then the fetal pole, cardiac activity, embryonic movements. We measure the CRL, and that's the best parameter to decide what is the gestational age. Second trimester, we have anomaly scan, which is quite important, done around 18 to 20 weeks. But before that, we can do nuchal translucency scan. We'll see that, the screening test in detail. When we do second trimester scan, what we measure is biparietal diameter, head circumference, abdominal circumference, fetal length. These parameters are again repeated in third trimester to see how the fetus is growing. In IUGR, usually BPD, HC and FL, they don't get affected. The parameter which gets affected is abdominal circumference, because in IUGR there would be brain sparing. Once the fetus is getting less blood, whatever blood the fetus is getting, that is diverted to the important system, that is brain. And the head will grow at normal pace. Long bones will also grow at normal pace. But what will be affected is the abdominal circumference. There would be decreased subcutaneous fat, and AC will show lag, and these three parameters will be growing at the normal pace. So best marker for growth becomes abdominal circumference. In third trimester, again ultrasound tells us information about biparietal, HC, AC and FL, and also about AFI. Liker, we need to know what is the quantity. That is again important for Manning score as well. So MCQ, fetal marker of growth in USG, whether it is abdominal girth, AFI, femur length, or regular serial USG bony measurements. So for growth, the more important marker is abdominal girth. What are the markers for chromosomal abnormality which are seen on ultrasound? Nuchal translucency is a very sensitive marker. Increased nuchal translucency more than 3 mm in between 11 to 14 weeks is associated with increased incidences of trisomy 21, 18, 13, even other conditions like cystic hygroma, cardiac defects, etc. This NT, it should not be just more than 3, but there are now the detailed information available for how much CRL, how much NT is considered as normal. So that way we can check the chart. Even presence or absence of nasal bone becomes a big marker. Nasal bone is absent or hypoplastic in around 70% fetuses of trisomy 21. So if the nasal bone is absent, that adds to the risk. And it is also absent in trisomy 18 and 13. Now let's see more information about nuchal translucency. If NT for that particular age and particular CRL is more than 95th centile, then it strongly suggests fetal chromosome. It's by Nicolaides. The prevalence of chromosomal defects increase exponentially with increased NT, and the defects are 50% have trisomy 21, 25% will have trisomy 18 or 13, 10% will have Turner's, 5 triploidy, and then the rest of the 10 will have other chromosomal defects. There are other defects also where NT is increased. They are like major cardiac defects, 81%, diaphragmatic hernia, exomphalus, body stalk anomaly, fetal akinesia deformation sequence, and very important is skeletal dysplasia. So if you can't remember everything, at least remember that 3 chromosomal defects, that is those trisomies, Turner syndrome, major cardiac defect, diaphragmatic hernia, and skeletal dysplasias. So if we have a patient with increased NT, we should rule out all these abnormalities. Other marker are fetal facial angle. It's also known as frontomaxillary angle. The flat facial profile is seen in trisomies. Ductus venosus, when we use Doppler and tap the ductus venosus, and if it shows abnormal flow, it is associated with chromosomal abnormalities, cardiac anomalies, and adverse fetal outcome. 80% association is with trisomy 21. So when we do NT scan, we see NT, NB, that is nasal bone, ductus venosus flow, and along with that when we do beta HCG and PAPE, then the sensitivity of that particular screen almost reaches to 96 to 98% to detect these chromosomal abnormalities. Serious abnormalities are also seen in all these 3 trisomies. Nuchal edema. Nuchal edema of more than 6 mm. These are now second trimester mark. Nuchal translucency, the translucent area it will vanish later. It cannot be measured after 14 weeks, and it's not a structural defect as such. It will vanish. It will either become a nuchal fold or nuchal edema. So when the baby lands up in second trimester, now we will not be able to measure nuchal translucency. So what are the things? Nuchal edema, if it is more than 6 mm, it is associated with chromosomal abnormalities more like trisomy 21, cardiac defects, infections, and genetic syndrome. Ventriculomegaly, if we see that the brain shows ventricles dilated, there is increased risk of cerebral maldevelopment, neurological deficit. Short femur, it's seen again as a chromosomal effect and commonly found in trisomy 21. Hyperechogenic bowel. The bowel looks normal, but it becomes echogenic as the bone. So this hyperechogenic bowel is common cause in intraamniotic bleed, as well as it's a marker of cystic fibrosis, chromosomal defects, cytomegalovirus infection, and early onset growth retardation, which can be because of fetal infections. So as such, it's not a structural defect, but if present, it tells us that please rule out these conditions. Echogenic foci in heart. It can be just a calcium deposit. You look at the heart on ultrasound and you get one bright spot there, white color. That is not a structural defect. It's not any kind of cardiac defect, but it's a soft marker. If present, it tells us that it is associated with cardiac defects and chromosomal abnormalities. Only isolated foci of this, the risk of trisomy is increased. Choroid plexus cyst. It is associated with trisomy 18 and 21. So in the ventricles, if we have choroid plexus cyst bilaterally present, we have to rule out 18 and 21 trisomies. Renal anomalies. If there is pelvic alveolar system dilatation, hydronephrosis, rule out trisomy 21. Horseshoe kidney, dilatation of the renal pelvis, trisomy 18, 13, 21. So these were soft markers which are seen on ultrasound, which are not actually structural defects. Structural defects are like exomphalos, gastroschiasis, neural tube defect, where the defect is there. These are the markers who are present. They indicate that please evaluate further for any chromosomal abnormality. But if the chromosomal abnormality is not there, these markers will vanish. They will not leave any mark on the structure of the baby. They will not cause any problems. Presence of echogenic bowel will not hamper any GI tract motility or anything. Echogenic focus present in heart is not a structural defect. Usually, when only single marker is present, it's of not much of value. But if two and more markers are present, then surely we need to evaluate the baby further to rule out chromosomal abnormalities. So this finishes with the markers, ultrasound and screening test and confirmatory tests for chromosomal and structural defects. Let's solve this MCQ. Open neural tube defect is best diagnosed by USG, MSFP, X-ray or amniotic fluid acetylcholinesterase. Now the answer cannot be USG because sometimes we may miss some defects on ultrasound. MSFP, it is raised, but it is raised in both abdominal as well as neural. X-ray again will not, it cannot be done in pregnancy. So the right answer here is amniotic fluid acetylcholinesterase level. It will be very specific of neural tube defect. So we have to always give a best answer. That's why in between two, MSAFP and amniotic fluid acetylcholinesterase, you have to choose the best answer as the answer. Thank you.